How many of you use a turn signal when you don't really have to? You live on a residential street and you're turning into your driveway. Do you put your turn signal on? If you're going to work and your work location is a rural road with very little traffic, you turn in, do you put your turn signal on? If you're in a parking lot at a grocery store, do you use your turn signals to come in and out of the lanes? If you do this, do you do it out of habit, or do you do it thoughtfully? Are you thinking? More to the point, if you're not using your turn signal to turn in that driveway or into your work location, are you doing that consciously? Are you doing it thoughtfully? Are you looking in the rearview mirror and seeing no traffic? So, I don't need to use the turn signal. I was thinking about this in the context of our fire operations and the things that we do and don't do, and our habits and our routines and our good practices. So in the context of all of that, I've been working in the same work area now for over 15 years. So I've seen work progress or evolve over a 15-year period. And I started to look back at 15 years ago and 10 years ago and 5 years ago and now at how we're doing things, the things we're doing, and where that's changed and why that's changed over the years, if things have changed at all. So looking back over the past 15 years, I look at some of the things we've done that we don't do now, and I ask myself, well, why don't we do them now? Did we just get lazy? The folks that are in the fire world tend not to be the lazy type. We tend to be just the opposite. So if we rule laziness out, did we work through a problem, because all situations in fire are essentially problems that we work through, and determine that some things weren't necessary anymore, weren't needed, weren't practical? Why did we do them in the first place? You might ask that question. So if we made a conscious decision not to do something anymore, was that a thoughtful decision? Was that a considered decision? And what went into that decision? What changed to make that no longer a necessity? To a certain extent, I'd say a lot of what we do is a product of our experience. We do what we know. Now, a lot of us come from a suppression background. I know I do. The first half of my career was almost exclusively spent in fire doing fire suppression. So when we transition from the suppression side of things over to the prescribed fire side of things, we tend to bring things with us, and that is a good thing, I think. One aspect of that fire suppression experience that I brought over, and I saw a lot in our prescribed fire operations 15 years ago, was our use of water and assorted ways to use water. That would be hose lays and folded tanks, and putting in pump stations, damming up streams to make pump stations. All these are things that we did on prescribed fires over the past number of years. A lot of those we don't do anymore. A lot of them I think we did because it was a familiarity. We were used to doing it on fire suppression. We felt comfortable doing it. We were good at it. I would say that the things that we're good at, we should not stop practicing. So on prescribed burns, we brought that right over from the fire suppression side of things. We were putting in hose lays, we were plumbing lines, we were setting up folded tanks. We were doing all those sorts of things. We were putting in pump stations in inconvenient locations, as it were, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. All these were things that were done, we felt, out of necessity, and sometimes they were, and sometimes they probably weren't, but we did them anyway. Why did we stop doing those? Well, for a variety of reasons. We started using engines a lot more where we could. And an engine with 200 or 300 gallons of water, sometimes we would think would no longer necessitate, putting a Fulda tank up because we had the water source already. We were using UTVs far more often, and in those circumstances, we were using the engines in lieu of the Fulda tanks and using the UTVs in lieu of the engines. So that was certainly a reason. Other reasons were the lines that we plumbed 10 or 15 years ago and then burned off of. We discovered that the hose lays were no longer necessary. The fire behavior that we were seeing did not need the hose lays to support those lines. For different reasons. One, the fire behavior that we were seeing diminished through time because of repeated burn applications. It was also because what we were expecting when we burned off of those lines the first few times was different than what we actually saw. So we plumbed the line thinking we were going to see problematic fire behavior. We did not see that, and therefore we felt we no longer needed to put the hose lays in and go to that effort. All of that's okay. What we strive for, should be striving for, is more efficient use of our time, more efficient use of our efforts. And if we don't have to go to the time and trouble of putting a hose lay in or setting up a Fulda tank and then filling the Fulda tank, that's an efficient use of our time. That's okay. We just want to make sure that we're doing that because we've thought through it and made the determination that this is no longer something we need to do, and move on to other things. But our habits and our routines are good things. We want to build good habits and good routines and good practices. We should be practicing, we should not practice the things that we're good at. Just the opposite. We should be practicing the things we're good at to ensure that we stay competent and stay good at them and get better at them. So sometimes doing these things that are no longer necessary, so to speak, are still good to do for those practice reasons, for that competency reason. And oh, by the way, because at one point we thought we needed them, maybe we really do need them. Maybe our evaluation of the situation is flawed in some way, and maybe we should reconsider some of those things that we did in the past and start considering doing them again.